All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive.
Yeah.
We're going to tackle something pretty slippery today, post-truth politics. And let me tell you, this one's a real head scratcher. We're not just talking about politicians bending the truth. Like that's old news. This is about how truth itself, like the whole concept, seems to be losing its power.
Yeah, it's like we've entered this weird zone where objective facts, those things we used to rely on,
Right.
they kind of take a backseat to feelings and beliefs.
So not just your average political spin then, more like...
It's different, yeah. It's like in the past, politicians, they might have stretched the truth a bit, but everyone kind of knew it was happening, like wink, wink. But now it's like the whole idea of truth is it's up for grabs.
So how does that even work? I mean, how can facts, like actual facts, become less important than how we feel about something? Especially when we're talking about things that affect everyone.
Well, it's not that facts just vanish, right? It's more like they become just one piece of this very, very complex puzzle, and you've got this constant flood of information, especially online.
And I know it.
It makes it really hard to sift through what's real and what's
fake. It's like every time I open my phone, I feel like I'm drowning in information.
Exactly. And then on top of that, we don't really trust the old authorities anymore, the gatekeepers.
Right.
We used to have trusted news sources, experts, people who could kind of help us sort things out. Now, well, anyone with a Twitter account can claim they're an expert.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there. But instead of cowboys and saloons, it's
opinions
and clickbait.
Exactly. And, social media doesn't help.
Yeah.
You get stuck in those echo chambers.
Oh, those echo chambers for sure.
You're surrounded by people who already agree with you.
Preaching to the choir.
Right. The algorithms feed you more of what you already like. So it's easy to get stuck in your bubble and never even see the other side.
And then you've got this whole...
attention economy.
Right. The attention economy. Where grabbing attention seems to be the only thing that matters. So a shocking headline or a juicy story, it doesn't even matter if it's true, right?
It'll go viral.
It'll spread way faster than something, that's nuanced and fact-based.
It's true. The loudest, most emotional voices, they tend to win. Whether they're right or wrong, It's like this constant competition for our eyeballs and our emotions, and truth kind of gets left behind.
So we're drowning in information, we don't trust anyone, we're stuck in echo chambers, and truth is sacrificed for clicks and shares. Sounds like a recipe for chaos, honestly.
It leads to anxiety, for sure. A lot of people feel this unease. It's not that facts are gone. It's just, you're constantly bombarded with all this conflicting stuff. It's hard to know what to believe.
So where do we see this, playing out in the real world? Can you give us some concrete examples?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the Brexit campaign. Remember that bus? The one with the big slogan about how much money the UK sends to the EU?
Yeah, 350 million pounds a week, right?
Right, and it was debunked over and over again, but it didn't matter.
Really?
Because it tapped into this powerful narrative, And for a lot of people, that narrative felt more real, more true than any expert analysis.
So even though it was, factually wrong, the emotional impact was stronger.
Exactly. That's how post-truth works, It's not just about lying. It's about creating a story that connects with their emotions, their fears, even if it's not based in reality.
Wow. Okay, so that's Brexit. What else?
Well, look at the 2016 U.S. election. There were so many demonstrably false claims made during that campaign, but they still resonated with people.
And it wasn't just that they believed them, right? It was almost like...
it was a choice.
Yeah, a choice to believe a story that fit their existing beliefs, even if the evidence said something else.
You're getting it. It's like we're moving from a fact-based worldview to a story-based one. And the stories that win, they're the ones that tap into our emotions, our fears, our hopes, even if they're not, entirely true.
That's kind of unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah, it raises all sorts of questions, like how do we make decisions? How do we form opinions? How do we even govern ourselves if truth is, subjective?
So if truth is up for grabs and our emotions are being, manipulated by these powerful stories, where does that leave us?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. We have to start thinking differently. How we consume information, how we evaluate sources, how we talk to each other.
Okay, so what are some strategies we can use to navigate this post-truth world?
First thing, we got to be more aware of our own biases. We all have them.
Right.
And understanding how they shape how we see things, that's crucial.
So taking a step back, asking ourselves, why do I believe this? What evidence do I have?
Exactly. And we need to be more picky about the sources we trust. Just because someone we know shares something doesn't make it true. We gotta check sources, look for evidence, be willing to consider other points of view.
So being more active, right?
Yeah.
Not just passively absorbing whatever comes our way.
Exactly, and this is a big one. We gotta talk to each other, even when we disagree.
Oh, I know. It's so tempting to just stay in our own little bubbles.
That just makes things worse, you know? Talking to people, even when it's hard, it's crucial. For a healthy society, I mean.
Okay, so recognizing our biases, checking our sources, having tough conversations, those sound like good starting points for sure. But this feels like such a massive issue. What can we do about it, like on a larger scale?
Well, there are a few things. For one, we need more transparency from those social media giants. We gotta understand how those algorithms work, how they're feeding us information.
So like opening up the black box, making them accountable for what they're promoting.
Exactly, and we need to support those initiatives that teach people how to think critically, you know, media literacy, all that.
Like starting in schools, right? Teaching kids how to evaluate information, to recognize bias.
Absolutely, it's about empowering people to think for themselves, not just believe everything they see.
This has been really insightful, I have to say. It feels like we've just scratched the surface of this whole post-truth thing, though. But we're going to have to take a quick break here. Don't go anywhere, because we'll be right back with more of our deep dive into post-truth politics right after this. Welcome back, everybody. We're picking up our deep dive right where we left off. Before the break, we were talking about all those little things we can do, right? Like recognizing our own biases, checking those sources before we share stuff, and having those tough conversations even when we'd rather just avoid them.
Yeah, and those individual actions, even if they seem small, they can make a difference. The more people who are out there, you know, thinking critically, the less misinformation can spread. It's like we're building up a resistance.
So it's kind of like a collective responsibility then. We all play a part in shaping how information flows around us. But you mentioned earlier how these social media algorithms can actually help misinformation spread. Can you break that down a little more for us?
Sure. Think about it. When you're scrolling through your feed, what grabs your attention?
Oh, you know me. The more dramatic the headline, the better. Gotta get those clicks right.
Right, and that's exactly what these algorithms are designed to do. Keep us scrolling, keep us clicking, keep us engaged, but they're not really concerned with whether something is true or not.
So it's like a vicious cycle then. The more we click on that crazy stuff, even if it's fake, the more the algorithms show us more of it.
Exactly, and that creates this system where, you know, the truth kind of gets buried under all the noise, facts are still out there, it's just, they're competing with a tidal wave of misinformation.
This whole algorithm thing, it makes me feel a little powerless, to be honest. Like we're just puppets dancing to their tune.
I get that. It's why we need to understand how they work, their limitations, and be really critical of what they're showing us, not just blindly accepting it as, you know, the gospel truth.
So how do we fight back against these algorithms? They seem so powerful.
Well, first off, we got to demand transparency. Make those tech companies show us what's going on under the hood. How are these algorithms designed? What data are they using? How are they shaping what we see?
So like pulling back the curtain, right? No more secrets.
Right, and then we can push for changes. Make accuracy and trustworthiness more important than just going viral. It's not about censoring anyone, but about creating a system that values quality information. Makes it easier for people to find reliable sources.
So it's about changing the game, right?
Yeah.
Valuing truth over clicks.
Exactly. And beyond social media, we need to invest in those traditional media outlets, public broadcasting, things like that. They play a crucial role in fact-checking, giving context, holding those in power accountable, you know, the things we used to rely on.
So supporting those sources that have a history of, you know, getting it right.
Exactly. And then the big one, equipping individuals with the skills to navigate this whole mess. Critical thinking, media literacy, all that. We need to teach it everywhere, schools, online, everywhere.
So giving people the tools to evaluate sources, recognize bias, separate fact from opinion, basically be their own fact checkers.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of critical inquiry, where people are encouraged to question what they see, to seek out different perspectives, to have those respectful disagreements. That's how we build a more informed society.
All of this makes sense, but it feels like a huge undertaking. how do we actually make this happen? Change the way we consume information on such a massive scale.
It's definitely a challenge, but I think the first step is recognizing the problem. This isn't just about politics, it's about society as a whole. The erosion of trust, the spread of misinformation, the polarization, it affects all of us, no matter what our beliefs are.
So it's common enemy then, something we need to address together as a society.
Absolutely, and the stakes are high. When truth becomes subjective, when we let our emotions and biases control how we see the world, it undermines everything. Democracy, civil society, even our personal relationships.
Wow, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
So in this post-truth world, is there any hope for a brighter future?
I believe there is, but it takes effort from individuals, from institutions, from everyone. We need to remember why truth matters, invest in education, hold those in power accountable, and create a culture of open-mindedness and respectful dialogue. It's a lot, but we can do it.
So it's a collective challenge, but one we can overcome if we work together.
Exactly. This post-truth era, it's scary, but it's also an opportunity to grow, to innovate, and to recommit ourselves to truth and reason.
You know, this conversation has really been thought-provoking. But I'm curious to dig even deeper. What are some of the bigger, societal impacts of living in a post-truth world?
That's a great question, and it's one we need to explore further. Because the erosion of truth, it has consequences for our political systems, for our relationships, for our sense of reality itself. And we need to understand what those consequences are so we can start addressing them.
So it's not just about politics then. It's about the very fabric of our society.
Exactly. When we can't agree on basic facts, when we're constantly questioning what's real, it's hard to build trust, make good decisions, work together to solve problems.
It's like we're losing our shared reality, the foundation that holds everything together.
That's a good way to put it. And without that shared foundation, it's easy for division and conflict to take root.
This is all starting to feel a bit heavy. Is there any hope for a brighter future in a post-truth world?
I believe there is. But it requires a conscious effort on the part of individuals, institutions, and society as a whole. We need to rediscover the value of truth, to invest in education and critical thinking, to hold those in power accountable, and to create a culture of respectful dialogue and open-mindedness.
So it's a collective challenge, but one that we can overcome if we work together.
Precisely. The post-truth era presents us with a unique set of challenges, but it also offers an opportunity for growth, for innovation, and for a renewed commitment to truth and reason.
We're back, and man, this whole post-truth thing it's kind of messing with my head. You know, we've talked about the algorithms, our own biases, what even is truth anymore, but it all boils down to, what do we actually do about it?
It's a big question, right? And it's not just some theoretical thing. It affects everything, how we live, how we relate to each other, how our whole society works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So besides those personal steps we can take, what about the big picture? How do we tackle this post-truth problem on a societal level?
Well, there's no easy fix, that's for sure. But I think a good starting point is we gotta rethink how we approach information. We're drowning in it, right? And that makes it so hard to separate the good stuff from the junk.
We talked about media literacy before, but how do we actually teach that to everyone?
It's gotta start early, Build those critical thinking skills from when kids are little. Not just teaching them to spot fake news, but how to, really evaluate sources, understand bias, think for themselves.
So not just memorizing facts, but learning how to think about the facts.
Exactly. And it can't stop at school,
Yeah.
Adults need this too. The information world is always changing, so we gotta keep learning.
Yeah, got to keep up, right?
Right?
But what about those people who are already, deep down the rabbit hole of misinformation? How do we reach them?
That's tough, honestly. If you just tell them they're wrong, they usually just dig in deeper. So you gotta find another way. Building trust, finding common ground, that's key.
So less about you're wrong and more about, hey, we both care about this, let's look at the facts together.
Exactly. Find those shared values, if someone's worried about crime, you start with, I get it, I'm worried too, but the data actually shows.
You kind of meet them where they're at emotionally, but then gently bring in the facts.
You got it. Emotions are powerful, we can't ignore that.
Yeah.
But we can use them to guide people towards, a more accurate understanding.
Okay, so education, trust building, finding common ground, that's all good for the long game. But what about those urgent situations, like during elections or a public health crisis, where misinformation can really do damage?
In those cases, we need those big platforms, those institutions to step up, hold those social media companies responsible for the stuff that spreads on their watch. Not just fact-checking after the fact, but preventing the spread in the first place.
Isn't that tricky, though? I mean,
Well,
freedom of speech, all that.
yeah, it's a tough balance. But just like we have laws against yelling fire in a crowded theater, we need some safeguards against spreading information that can really hurt people.
So finding ways to protect free speech, but also protect people from being manipulated.
Right. That might mean labeling stuff that's misleading, boosting those reliable sources, maybe even slowing down how fast things go viral until they can be checked out.
It sounds like we need a whole new way of thinking about online information then. It can't just be a free-for-all anymore.
I agree. The internet, it's not the Wild West anymore. We need some rules of the road, some accountability to protect ourselves, you know?
And that takes everyone working together, right? Not just the government and tech companies, but all of us.
Absolutely. We each have a role to play. Be informed, support good sources, challenge misinformation, talk to each other respectfully. That's how we fight back against this post-truth wave.
This deep dive has been a wild ride, I gotta say. Scary at times, but also hopeful. We have the tools and the will to make things better.
Totally agree. It's a long road ahead, but every step towards truth, towards understanding, it makes a difference.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us. Just remember, in this fight against post-truth, we're all in this together. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.